with the Farm2Table Direct Show, and we are here in Nevada
Until
at the
12
beginning
hours,
of this
that's
Homestead Expo. And right in front of me here, we have the Jarrards, who's talking about preparing for winter off-grid. And I'll be, so you can kind of tune into what they're talking about.
How about lamps? Each lamp. And then that goes back to your light bulbs. Love LED light bulbs. But you can start calculating what each thing is, put that into a spreadsheet, and then you're able to say, oh, this is what I need. Okay, great. On my second page of my spreadsheet, what I've got is you can look at different kinds of batteries. I love the LifeCo for lithium. They're light. I mean, I got a 200 amp hour battery, 12 volt, 200 amp hours, and it's almost twice the size of a normal marine battery, and it's less than half the weight of a normal marine battery. It's so much lighter to move. Anyway, so I've got those set up. But you can also, there's something called AGM, and then you've got your normal lead acid. They all have pluses and minuses. Right now for my LifeCo, which goes into the winter prep though, I cannot charge the lithium ion phosphate batteries if it's below freezing. If the battery is below freezing, you can't charge. You can drain them until negative temperature we don't get here in Oklahoma. I don't really care about that.
Because I had a little solar panel battery box and my chicken coop, and that won't charge past or under 32.
Well, and it will charge, but it'll damage the batteries, at least on the lithium. On my system,
this must have like a mechanism to shut it off.
Sometimes they will.
Yeah.
Sometimes they will have a temperature gauge, and when it gets to a certain temperature, it stops to save the batteries. Now you can still drain them. You can keep going, and you can use, again, lithium goes down much colder as in use. So what we ended up doing is using a foam, closed foam, and I made a little box around my batteries and all my solar stuff in the shed, and that helped. I think just by itself, that gave us another, I think it kept it about 10 degrees above outside ambient, because it's inside of a metal shed, and that's where that's at. So then I wrapped it. That kept it about 10 degrees warmer. I ended up putting a seat mat. I didn't use very much electricity, so I put that in there, and that raised it a little bit. But last January, when we had our really cold Arctic thing, I had like incandescent spotlight. I'm doing everything I can. I ended up running the, which people on the internet would probably tell me it was a horrible idea, but I had an electric or a gas smoker, and I ran that in there. I'd shut the door. I'd get it running. Once it got above freezing, I would open one of the panels to the foam, so the heat would get into the batteries, and then I would just keep it above freezing, and then I would turn off the thing once it was above freezing.
So like when you did your calculator, was there things that you had to eliminate? Because I even use those calculators, and it says I need like 50-some panels.
Your problem, you may have to. Sometimes it's like, you know what, we just can't run, like the air conditioner. We can't run the air conditioner as much as we really would like to run the air conditioner. I can run the air conditioner. We'll run our bedroom, the window unit. We turn it on about 7 o'clock in the evening to cool it down. And we've got it set up at the end of the summer. We run it until almost 1:30, 2 o'clock. And then we had a timer. Because it's just a stand, so it's on, you on off, plug it into the wall, you plug the air conditioner into it, and it would kick on at 7 and it would shut off at 2. And with the ceiling fan above the bed, it would keep the cabin cool several hours into the morning usually, but you didn't wake up hot. But we couldn't just let it run all night. In the air conditioner in the living room, I did my best in there as well to keep it, okay, I'll wait until I really can't stand it anymore, but I'll turn a fan on, and as long as it's blowing on me, it's not horrible. And about 1 to 2 o'clock.
Yeah, I'm like that. My wife's not.
About 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Well, she'll stay outside. She knows the heat. And I'm more of a, Oklahoma doesn't have winters. We get a little chilly, but that's about it. Except for last winter when we had 2 weeks of, oh my goodness, we're all freezing to death. But so there's that. You also have different sized panels, and that comes in to help you with the cost.
Yeah.
So you got different kinds of batteries you can use. Lead acid is your cheapest. They're heavy, they're cheap. If you're not moving them around like in a trailer, like a campers or RVs, you don't really care about the weight. You know, ground's gonna hold whatever. So I can use a whole bunch of lead acid. The problem with lead acid is you're not supposed to ever drop them below 50%.
Yeah.
So if you're trying to use your solar, it's like, okay, I need this much electricity for a single day, and most days it'll charge back up. You know, so okay, great. Well, I need this many batteries. Okay, now I need to double it.
Yeah.
Or a little more. Okay, great. Now, but that's good for one day. What if you end up with 3 or 4 days of storms and you don't have a lot? Now they'll charge, your batteries will charge even on the cloudiest of days, but they're not going to charge a lot.
Yeah.
So I try to get over that. And then with the panels, you got 200 watt, 300 watt, 400. They have all sorts of different size panels. They all have different costs, but you know, 200 watt panels is usually cheaper than a 400 watt panel. Not always. It may be a little. It may go the other direction. It depends on pricing and stuff like that. The problem's the size of the panels. How heavy are the panels? Where are you installing the panels? We've got ours set up 2 4x4 posts, and then I made a frame and I had it level, and I got up on a ladder and I'd pick them up and I'd set the panels down, and then I clipped them, and then I angled them.
Yeah.
And I adjust my angles twice. Way to go, mother-in-law. And then
I'm bored.
I know. I'll adjust my panel angle about
That was hitting you back and saying nobody's in here.
So you didn't care. During the summer, they're more flat, and then it's about time for me to adjust my angles to bring them lower down to the horizon to get more of that direct sunlight that helps with the thing. You can mount them on a roof and leave them. They can be static mount. People do them all the time. Since I'm 100% on the solar, I want to optimize it. Now, the most optimized is the electronic ones that they're sun trackers. And they'll come up and they'll fall in the sky. I've heard their prices aren't as bad as you would think, but I've never priced them.
See, my plan was I was gonna, like, I was pricing like a Generac when we first built our house, and I was like, well, if I'm gonna dump money in a Generac and then dump money in solar, how can I build a solar system that's like a Generac that will just be for the electricity goes out, and because we have a pretty weak power grid here.
What you can do there, we do have a generator. I got one of the super quiet Predator generators from Harbor Freight. I did some research. We were about to go buy a Honda because I've heard those were just the quietest ones you could get. I did some research, and I was finding the Harbor Freight ones were doing just as good and almost just as quiet at half the cost.
Because what I was gonna do is I was gonna take my my panel and make another panel just like necessity stuff. Like an electric goes out, this is what we need.
I've not messed with the crossover because I'm 100% off grid.
Yeah.
I'm not tied to the grid. I do know my panel, like my one unit is a charger inverter. It's a inverter. Anyway, it does them both.
Yeah.
I'll think of the name in a second for whatever reason. But my solar panel comes into my box, and then from that it charges my batteries. But this same box will also take my battery and inverter. So it'll converter and invert, and then it'll go into, I've got a breaker box right next to it. So it's wired into the breaker box, and in those, I have one set going to one building to a breaker box in there, and one wire going to another building off of 2 different breakers in there. That way I can turn one off if I need to. So I've got those set up, but it'll also take what it's called shore. A lot of them, I think that's what they call them shore energy or shore power, and that's your grid.
Yeah.
So you could have a battery system that runs off of your house actually,
Yeah.
instead of solar. So you can have the batteries, and as far as like piecemealing it, this may be a good way to go. Buy your batteries, buy your inverter, let your shore charge them, and then off of the batteries, it goes to run whatever you're going to run.
Okay.
And then
Then start adding
when you
panels.
lose electricity, it's still running from your batteries.
Okay.
And then later you can start adding panels, sending it to the charger. Now, what I don't know with a grid tied system is I do know electricity will go back up the panel. So like in hurricanes and tornadoes, you can turn off, if you turn on a generator, you can send power back up the line, which then can cause problems for linemen.
Yeah, so
There is a box that's made that when you flip the switch from your solar, it flips the switch off to solar and switches it on to generator, so there's no backup.
Cool.
Yeah.
So but that's something I've not done.
Yeah.
And that's not something I have to do. So that's,
Yeah.
you know, I know there's a problem.
They did that because before people started doing solar, generators were running, but when they did it, if a lineman was down the road,
Right.
it shot power back to him and possibly killed him.
Right.
So that's why they had to make that. That's a mandatory law now, federal and state.
Yeah, I know that, like, the boxes that you switch out when you do the inverters, they have the master switch when you go to one, it turns off the other. So,
And that may be what, my box may actually do that by default, because both come into the box.
Well, if
and
you have
both,
generator, it has to.
well, my generator goes into my shore box.
Yeah.
On my solar panel, and then my PV, my solar power comes into my PV jacks on my box, and then they go to my batteries, and then they go to my breaker boxes. But I'm not shore tied, I'm not tied to the grid, so I don't have to worry about.
it's like ones that I've seen are like big old black boxes that go on top of your master switch,
Mhm.
and it'll have like clamps on both sides. That way, when you switch it, it'll automatically flip both sides where it needs.
And then on my
You can do it. You can do ingenuity and do it with a piece of wire.
on mine, what I can do is it'll say what's your, because mine's set to for charging and for shore or battery. Which do I want to be my primary? What do I want to charge my batteries primary from? Primarily from shore or primarily from solar? And then that way, as you start adding batteries, you can say, well, you can start picking how are you charging your batteries from. But it would make a good
There you have it,
cutoff.
folks. We are here in Nevada. We're listening to Winterizing went off the grid. And they're talking about solar panels. And that's just another example of
I thought about setting
what you can learn at these events. Not to mention, networking with people that are so knowledgeable about all aspects in the homesteading community. So stay tuned. We'll be covering a little bit more a little later.